Albert, prometiste que volvías a hacer aventura conmigo y encima en León y has venido.
Me lo pasé bien, tengo que volver. No me podía quedar en casa.
Nada más empezar, ya estoy feliz.
¿Sí?
Y me hiciste caso. Mira qué colorín que has metido, que te veo la camiseta por fuera, el forro amarillo así. Tú mira cómo vamos de guapines.
Elegante.
It's actually maybe not so much of my claim. I would do circularity right away, if possible. It is more of a claim of textile industry in general. There is a consensus there that this is the target we should aim at. And how Reverse Resources is helping to achieve that is by offering a business case that makes it actually really desirable. Also, not just something it's nice to do or we feel that we need to do, but it actually makes sense as a business. We have built a win-win business case where we incentivize collaboration and we help the textile industry to collaborate and do better business through that. And I've been also kind of jokingly saying that it's kind of like an acupuncture to find that right spot where to press so that the system starts to react on that. So I would say that this is what we are trying to do with our platform. The biggest barriers, I think, is that circular economy is such a new thing. We are so aligned with thinking in a linear way that we don't even understand what the difference is or what the change actually means. And it's very difficult to sometimes convince people to think out of that box. It's difficult to make people listen to a point where they understand that, now I actually get what you mean. Because it's very easy from that shallow level think that I understand what it is you're saying, but actually it may mean more things that you don't actually observe instantly. And then the other thing is, even if you listen, if you do understand what you're suggesting, we often see that people don't tend to believe the evidence before they have had the experience for the first time themselves. So getting people to come along and get started is actually the biggest barrier. While we see a lot of this activity that once things are tested out and I see for myself that it works, then it's very fast, it starts to spread actually. So getting started is the biggest barrier. It could be done right away, yes. But there are several things that need to happen in the same time. And creating this coordination is difficult. Like, for example, while there are different recycling technologies already available. Many of them are still in such an early stage. They need to continue the development so that they can do recycling on industrial scale. Right now, what we can do right away is recycling cotton waste back into high quality products. But where the technology is there, the industrial scale plants are there. But what is missing is the supply chain of waste. So there are different reasons why the whole system doesn't come together at the moment. And we need to kind of systemically keep building this system. And that takes time. But we have all the components needed to do that. The technological barriers, two things I would say. One is that the recycling of blended textiles is not available on a large scale or on industrial scale yet. And when I mean recycling blended textiles, I mean to such a level that the recycled product is high quality for the fashion industry to use again. Technically, cotton recycling can be done on large scale, but the cotton share of all textiles is very small. So this is one of the technical barriers. The other technical barrier is that post-consumer waste sorting cannot be done on large scale, composition by composition. And textile recyclers are really dependent on this exact composition information right now. Again, there are technologies now coming to the market, but it's still very early stage of it. It takes time to spread it. It takes time to make them better, connect the dots, and so on. But I would say that once these two obstacles technically are also solved, then 85-90% of any textile could be circulated over and over again. Regulation plays really important role, especially because of creating better market conditions and increasing the feasibility of these new practices. Because again, when we come from the linear economy, the system and the support mechanism is set up so that it's always supporting the linear thinking and linear supply chains. So policy and regulation needs to take a shift. But I think there is a lot of really lack of knowledge. How should we do that? What is the scenario or the system that is going to be there eventually? And how can we support the transition in the right way? How can we make sure that we are reaching that new system? I think there is, not so much common understanding how to do that. Fashion industry is leading that change internally, and I think public sector is not yet really understanding what their role should be. And in a way, it should be the other way around. The public sector would be leading it, but then how would they lead it if they don't know what the industry needs? So I think the dialogue between the public and private sector isn't there strong enough right now. And that's also one of the barriers. The big brands play this really important role of driving that change until public sector is not doing that, which is interesting because when we started with reverse resources initially, we realized that our business case is there only if there is a very clear general invitation to garment factories that you have to sort your waste, segregate your waste composition by composition. If the segregation is not done, recyclers can't get access to clean waste. The quality of the material drops, the price of the waste goes up for the recycler, the cost of recycling goes up. So this one decision makes a huge difference. And that is one of the many examples, but this call to action among suppliers that you have to segregate waste by composition, in theory, this should be something that the policy takes care of, that the government regulation demands it, that all the factories in our country should be segregating their waste by composition. But in practice, if we would want to wait for it, we would stay waiting forever. So that's why we are working in the framework of circular fashion partnership in Bangladesh. We invited 21 brands to go and invite 3 of their first factories. Please start segregating waste by composition, and brands kind of putting their efforts together and calling this out together made a huge difference. So we got that movement going. We got to demonstrate that there is, from this action only, there is a clear cycle of benefit for everybody that will happen. So brands carry a really important role here to lead the change. In Europe, we have majority of textile waste in the form of post-consumer waste because we have much less industry here. And obvious result is that in Europe, the policy puts its attention on post-consumer waste. But when we look at the industry in general, how the materials are flowing from between the continents, production done in Asia, a lot of consumption, Europe, US, the materials are flowing already. And in terms of creating that recycling industry, we have to understand these material flows. Where is most meaningful to recycle what exactly? What has happened is that a lot of new recycling technologies have been introduced first in Europe, but they are sensitive to composition, meaning that for them, the low-hanging fruit is to start using industrial waste first. And in Asia, we don't have those advanced recycling technologies yet. They have been always using their industrial waste, using it for low-grade products like car seats, furniture stuffing, carpets, rugs. They could actually be taking much better use of post-consumer waste. So we could initially exchange waste streams, which is not something that Europe is looking at. I think this is really important to look at these material flows and the types of materials available in different places. And Europe now has the plan that by 2025 we should be doing textile collection separately, which is a really important initiative. But in parallel to that, we need to understand which recycling technologies are there, how can we support the recycling technologies, and what are the gaps and market barriers. In my eyes, as I said before, technology is not actually the problem. The problem is the market barriers and the lack of information about these material flows, lack of market transparency, how these materials are moving right now. How much do we already have circularity? There is no statistics about it, actually. And so how can we actually measure progress towards circulation if we don't know these things? How much of the textile materials, secondary textile materials, are being used somehow already here and there? I don't know if it's going to change or how it's going to change. I think it is for a reason why there is more production in lower income countries. It's just because garment production is so work intensive, and it is cheaper in these countries to do garment production. So I think this is going to stay like that for a long time still. Question is, how is the raw material reaching the garment factories? And it's interesting that when I've seen these studies where life cycle analysis of a garment is done, then this international logistics isn't carrying such a heavy load there compared to the question of what is the raw material used in the first place. So at Reverse Resources, we also haven't really created a problem for ourselves from the fact where the waste material is moving between continents, if it actually reaches the best possible use case in terms of the material hierarchy. That if we keep in mind that the fiber is not just used once but has the potential to be used 10 times in different cycles. And that we consider that there is a hierarchy, that first we need to reuse garments, then we can talk about reuse of fabric, and then we can talk about reuse of fiber. And I think this hierarchy that we usually see talked about is much more simplified. So textile industry actually needs to look at this hierarchy a bit more thoroughly, and this material flow in the context of that hierarchy needs attention. No. Short answer. Because I like to bring this parallel with solar panels. It was so expensive, and it was almost ridiculed that nobody's going to use solar power. And then, like this, it was feasible. In terms of textile recycling, we are in this pre-competitive situation. There are first collections coming to the market, proving that this can even be done. There is no properly established supply chains. The industrial plants are doing their first test runs. Throughout every step of the system, we are doing this first experimental steps, and it is costly. And it's very difficult to measure or estimate the price of the product, how it's going to end up once the system is in place, once the policy starts supporting it, and so on. But we already see examples where recycled yarn can be 30% cheaper than a virgin yarn. So it is definitely possible, but it needs scale. Well, if you think about glass, then it has always been circular.
Albert, prometiste que volvías a hacer aventura conmigo y encima en León, y has venido.
Me lo pasé bien, tengo que volver. No me podía quedar en casa.
Nada más empezar, ya estoy feliz.
¿Sí?
Y me hiciste caso. Mira qué colorín que has metido, que te veo la camiseta por fuera, el forro amarillo así. Tú mira cómo vamos de guapines.
Elegante.